You were recently featured in the Chamber's new magazine called Capital, the Albany-Colonie Chamber. What does that mean to someone like you?
It was a big deal. It was I was called up, and we had talked a little bit about young professionals in the area, and so being on the committee that works with the chamber around young professionals, I just thought they were calling up for information or if I wanted to be quoted. And so when they approached me with both being in the article and then being on the cover, I was taken aback and just very honored to be considered. So it was very, very honored.
So share with me, because New Directions actually isn't based in Albany. So how does somebody working out of North Bennington, Vermont, find themselves so engaged with the Albany Chamber and eventually find themselves on the cover of their magazine?
Well, I think what we're seeing, one is an emergence of a creative economy, is kind of what we're calling it. And it's that idea that the silos of the past and even the way organizations are formed and collaborations are formed in the past doesn't work anymore. And so it's requiring us to get out of our bubble, whether that be geographically Vermont, whether that be in a department, whatever that happens to be. And so a lot of that is just our willingness to say, hey, just because we're based in Vermont doesn't mean we can't work in New York, doesn't mean we can't have a client in France, can't work in Canada. And so working with New Directions a lot of the time, we've always thought kind of outside the box and outside the state. And so that's really where working with the Albany Chamber of Commerce really came in, and we started doing work with them because it provided such a great outlet for us to meet people, talk business, talk shop, and eventually grow our client base too.
Now, the impetus behind the article is really around, one, your work with the Chamber, but two, this new book that you've authored or co-authored. Share your perspective, because you talk a little bit about the idea of breaking down those imaginary barriers, whether they be borders or department borders or whatever it is. So share with us a little bit how the book that you co-authored speaks along those lines of collaboration and breaking down borders and things like that.
Well, Survival of the Hive, we wrote a year ago, was published by Author House Publishing, just hit the market, and really came out of the idea of my mother is a beekeeper, and she had been beekeeping for quite some time, and had always come back to the office and talked just about the great collaborative nature of bees and how well they work together, and when the going gets tough, they just really kind of work together and pull together. They really are this great microcosm of how every organization could work. And so based on that, she and I developed some main ideas, which became the 7 leadership lessons, and wrote the book last year. A lot of that has to do with, again, this kind of new emerging workforce. The young professionals are driving this. But I think it's also based on the recession, or based on just how the world's changing with social media and everything. We're really needing to move away from the autocratic leader, the top-down management style of every organization. And when we look at companies like a Starbucks or a Facebook or Google or even Zappos, they have this great collaborative spirit. And so part of the idea behind the book is taking some of what the bees are doing organically, looking at what some of those companies are doing, and then applying it to best business practices, kind of leading into a new generation of the workplace.
So talk a little bit about, as you're talking about leadership opportunities at the Chamber, leadership opportunities in your business, what are some of the things you're seeing in that trend about the stereotype and how to change the stereotype?
One of the lessons from Survival of the Hive is this idea of leaving a footprint. And it's so kind of symbolizes kind of where you're at with your leadership. And so a queen bee will go around and leave footprints of her leadership everywhere, that the bees in the colony know that she's there, know that she's supporting them, that her leadership presence is there. And so even if you don't feel like you're being a leader or you're not in a leadership position, I would argue with you and say you're always in a leadership position, especially now. And part of, I think, what you're referencing is the idea that there are these stereotypes. We're too lazy, we don't show up on time, when we do show up we don't pay attention, and then we're extremely self-absorbed with ourselves. Some of that is true. You will run into that. Those stereotypes generally come from something. It's our job as millennials, as young professionals, to challenge that stereotype. The best way that I know how to challenge that stereotype is to not do it. And so that means showing up early. That means turning off your cell phone. That means showing up and being at the front of the class. One of the quotes from the book is showing up on time, ready to go. If 90% of people did that, they'd be 10 times more successful, because so many people in what I've seen in the last 5 to 7 years just don't show up. They're not on time. They don't produce anything. And so if you show up on time, ready to go, you're prepared, I think you'll be amazed at how many people are taken aback by that and take you more seriously. And I think that's part of the reason why I was asked to be in the magazine. One of the first things that I ever kind of ran into with the regional chamber was working side by side with other young professionals in what was then their Gen X program at one of their service events, and that's how we became so involved at that level. And then it just kind of blossomed over multiple years of me becoming part of that Gen X group, which now is Young Professional Network, just got renamed. But it just provides such an outlet and such an opportunity, and I couldn't encourage people more to get involved and also use it to kind of both network but also discover great leadership opportunities. You know, it didn't happen overnight. It took 3 to 4 years of me going to events and working with that group and then chairing the programming committee, and then just recently becoming a liaison for a statewide initiative that the Chamber's working on with young professionals, and we're really excited about that too. So it happens over some time, which we tend to want things now, but a great collaborative spirit and a great mission for, in my mind, a great mission for the Chamber and this YPN network.